Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast. That is, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with Kate Batchelder-Odell and Bill McGurn. Kate, just a little bit on the stakes here for Ukraine, talking about what happens if the United States does abandon Ukraine and if Russia then wins in that country and subjugates it to Putin's political control. The stakes include the fact that Russian forces then could be moved all the way to the border of Ukraine and Poland, right up to the edge of Romania, right up to the edge of the rest of NATO. And it makes for a much more difficult ability of NATO to defend its border areas and would require substantially more forward deployments and much more military investment. This is the paradox I think some of these opponents of Ukraine don't understand. A Ukraine defeat doesn't save money. It costs more.
Right. I mean, there is this odd delusion in Washington among Ukraine's critics that if they pass on the aid bill and just ignore it, that they can go back to fighting about the border or their own domestic politics. I think that's just completely fanciful. I think, too, it's quite obvious that Putin intends to subdue the entire country. He's not going to be satisfied with some new carve-out in the East, and that's been clear since he rolled into Kiev 2 years ago. And so, to your point, he would have just huge gains along NATO's border, and it would require NATO to defend all of that border. It would require us to deploy a lot more assets to NATO's eastern front and spread those assets really thin across just a much larger ground of territory. And so this is worth underscoring as we talk about, well, the U.S. needs to focus more on Asia. Well, if Ukraine collapses, the United States is going to have substantially more expense and headache in Europe, and it will have fewer, not more assets to put in Asia. So I think that's also a really important point to consider. If you want the United States to have fewer commitments in Europe, you want Ukraine to win and emerge as the strongest Eastern European military that exists.
Well, let's move back to the U.S. House of Representatives. Let's assume here, for the sake of argument, that the Speaker succeeds. These bills pass in some substantial form, make it to the Senate, they become law, President Biden signs it. House and Senate will then go on recess, but Marjorie Taylor Greene and now Thomas Massie of Kentucky have threatened that if this happens, they will trigger a motion to vacate the speakership, probably after the recess, if they follow through. And there would be a vote again to depose a second speaker during this Congress after they successfully tossed Kevin McCarthy. Now, the difference this time is that some Democrats are saying we will support the speaker against this effort to oust him. Tom Suozzi, New York congressman, Democrat, has already said he'll vote for Johnson, and he's urged his colleagues to do so, too. It isn't clear where Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, stands, but I think there'll be a substantial bill support among Democrats, I would guess, to vote for Johnson or to just stay away from the chamber. So fewer Republican votes are needed to be able to keep him in his job, given that Johnson will have taken this political risk and done what he thinks is right for the country.
Yeah, if Johnson prevails in that, he'll be stronger than he was going into this. I mean, what surprises me is that anyone would want to be speaker today. Really, there's no reward for doing the right thing, for being tough. I think he's played it right. You have to stake out a principle and back it, even if it costs you your job. I don't know, but I wonder if this is really an empty threat, because I'm not sure there's a lot of support for Marjorie Taylor Greene on this one. So I think they learned last time they were kind of ostracized, the people that brought down McCarthy. From their own point of view, it doesn't lead to better outcomes. So it'd just be vengeance, and it would just communicate a Republican Party in chaos.
Kate, you have your ear to the ground of the members of Congress here and Republicans. What do you think? Is this a phony threat or one that could possibly, if it fails, leave Johnson stronger.
Well, that's the risk that I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene would be taking, is that if you don't succeed and you have a big humiliation, what have you accomplished? I think Bill's exactly right that the job is not worth having from Mike Johnson's perspective if he's really just writing sidecar to whatever Marjorie Greene says that Congress can do on any given day. So I think his attitude is completely right, that the only thing for him to do is to stare down the critics and say, it's your choice if you want to bring that. And I think that calculation is going to be harder than it was with Kevin McCarthy. There were all sorts of personal grievances about Kevin McCarthy that I think were unfair, but motivated more members than currently exist now. I mean, Mike Johnson has dedicated his life to being a constitutional lawyer, defending Christians who oppose gay marriage and other unpopular stances. I mean, he's not someone who's easy to portray as a corrupt swamp sellout. I think it will be harder. And I think even members like Thomas Massie, who is thinking about going along with Marjorie Greene, has to think long and hard about whether his incentives are aligned with her. So I don't know that the threat is completely phony. It is real, but I think there's a real chance that Johnson is rewarded for showing conviction, like we said, and backbone, and does emerge from this with his job.
All right, we'll leave it there for today. It's going to be fun to watch this momentous debate going forward the next 72 hours. Looks like Saturday will be the day for the crucial votes in the House, assuming they move through the Rules Committee. We shall see how it goes. Thank you all for listening. Thanks to Kate and Bill. We're here every day on Potomac Watch, and we hope you're right with us tomorrow. Thank you.